All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here. We're doing our preview and prediction for the Las Vegas Bowl. 10-point spread in favor of Oregon State against the Gators. September 17th, a Saturday, 2:30 Eastern Time on ESPN, live from Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. First meeting ever between these two schools. Looking at the Gator offense, Nick, it's going to be a much different football team when they take the field for this bowl game, as Anthony Richardson has declared for the draft will not play in this one. Jack Miller, third-string quarterback, is yet to play in his career. He missed the first half of the year with a thumb injury. Looks like he's going to get the start here. First career start. Going to go against a pretty feisty Oregon State defense. It's going to be very tough for him, for this offense, though. 32 points per game, 441 yards per contest. I think the biggest number to highlight, 214 rush yards per game. That's what they're going to look to do in this game. They're looking to, hover with a dominant ground game. Montrell Johnson, 827 yards, 10 touchdowns. Trevor Etienne's been very good, 705 yards, 6 touchdowns. Naquan Wright is in the portal. Handful of receivers as well, but Ricky Pearsall's still there, 596 yards, 5 touchdowns, 20 yards per catch for this football team. Will Osiris Torrance opt out? I think that's another big storyline to, keep an eye on. We'll see what happens over the next few weeks before this game, Nick. But, Richardson being out against this defense, that's certainly going to be a big task. But I certainly think this ground game still has a bit of an edge behind Torrance if he plays, and a handful of these other guys like Richard Gorge. Top to bottom, this is a really good offensive line. I thought it was one of the best in the country coming into the year. Ethan White's had a really good year. Kingsley Uklon at guard also. They're going to be looking to run behind these guys. I think they're going to do it a lot with Miller getting his first career start here in the bowl game.
If Torrance does opt out, that Jalen Farmer would be taking over that right guard position, a true freshman. So obviously that would be a huge blow to this Florida offense. It's already losing a lot of talent due to opt-outs. Anthony Richardson, of course, declares for the draft. That makes a whole lot of sense for him. He still does have a high draft stock despite a disappointing season for Richardson. This offense didn't quite live up to expectations we had in the preseason. I think a lot of it is down to the fact that Richardson struggled as a passer. 53.8% completion percentage and 17 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. Richardson threw a lot of bad picks in bad moments. Now they kind of transition and move on. The team has had a shakeup of what's going on off the field so far in this towards the end of the season. Jack Miller, the true freshman, gets the start. No, redshirt freshman, right?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, you're redshirt.
No, you're right. Jack Miller, the redshirt freshman, gets the start. What will Jack Miller be able to do with this offense? I don't think they'll be throwing the ball a whole lot. I think they will rely on the running game, which is probably their key to success here. Montrell Johnson, Trevor Etienne, these guys are solid backs. Johnson has 5.7 yards per carry. Etienne is 6.4 yards per carry. Solid numbers here on the ground for the two of them. Johnson, of course, has 10 touchdowns. Etienne has 6. So this offense has some balance in the running attack, and I think they're going to have to rely on the running attack against Oregon State here because they don't really have a quarterback they know a whole lot about. Of course, they have a few weeks of when you're a freshman like that runs the limelight, it's going to be a tough adjustment for sure. It helps if Ricky Pearsall does play. We assume he will play. He's a talented wide receiver, a guy that you can throw the ball to. He's not declared for the transfer portal yet, but he's subject to transfer portal rumors. If he plays, it's good to have a weapon like that. Justin Shorter as well. I expect him to play. Another talented wide receiver that can certainly help out potentially. This is a tough spot for this Florida offense. They lost a lot of talent, like opt-outs, and could potentially lose more. I don't really know what to expect with this offense when they get on the field in this bowl game.
Fourth leading pass catcher, Dejon Reynolds. I know he's in the portal. Xavier Henderson, Justin Shorter, too. Productive pass catchers. They are expected to play along with Purcell. Looking at the Oregon State offense, Nick, I picked them to beat Oregon. They were down by 20-plus points in that game. They were able to come back, though, despite only completing 6 passes on the game. Gulbranson at quarterback, a pretty below-average year. Of course, he was forced into action due to injuries early on in the season. 46 yards, 2 picks in that win over the Ducks. But, he was able to get the job done, I guess, under center for them. Chance Nolan, of course, he got hurt. I believe he's now actually transferred. Quarterback's not very ideal for this football team. But much like Florida, they have a strong offensive line, very physical. Jake Levengood at center leads the way. A nice trio of running backs. Deshaun Fenwick should be healthy for this one. Damian Martinez. And then Griffin as well. This is a productive running game. Martinez especially, 970 yards and 7 touchdowns. A bulk of that has came over the back half of the season. Jam Griffin, 5.8 yards per touch, 486 yards for him. And Fenwick, being the bruiser he is, with 446 and 7 touchdowns. Very versatile running game for Oregon State, right there on that 200-yard per game mark. Treshaun Harrison, 52 grabs, 604 yards, 4 touchdowns. They've enjoyed having Anthony Gold back, an explosive guy. They can get things done in the slot. 27 grabs, 457 yards for him. 5'8", 164. A lot of athleticism in exchange for limited speed. This is an offense I really like, Nick. They seem to protect the football. They don't really seem to have much of a passing game. especially with how they played against the Duck. But this running game really gets the job done, and much like Florida, I think they're going to look to ride it through the entirety of the 60 minutes.
Yet another run-heavy offense for this bowl season. I do like the running game here at Oregon State. A lot of talent. Martinez leading the way, 970 yards on the ground, 6.1 yards per carry, and the 7 scores for him. Fenwick is a guy, underrated running back, a bruiser. He's going to run some people over. 7 touchdowns in the year for him, nearly 5 yards per attempt, 446 yards on the season in 93 touches. I like Fenwick a lot. Underrated back, in my opinion. Levels a guy out, can make a hit here and there. I like, he has good mobility as well. Bit deeper on the depth chart, but he's gotten a lot of touches so far this season. He's a guy I keep an eye on. The quarterback play has not been fantastic. Of course, Trans Nolan going down has not helped that. Gilbranson, he's done the best he can given the situation. He is just not quite what you need at quarterback here for Oregon State. So they are going to be heavy on the running game. I do expect them to run the ball a whole lot. Trayshawn Harrison, their leading wide receiver, should play in this one. I haven't heard anything about him leaving yet. He is 600 yards receiving on the year and 4 touchdowns for him. He's the leading wide receiver by about 100 yards. I'd like to see some targets to him early on. I think this offense has potential to put up some points due to the running backs. They do have 3 backs they can spread the ball out to. I think that offense, as long as Gilbranson protects the ball, the 2 interceptions against Oregon obviously were not ideal. 6 of 13 is also not ideal. If he can kind of raise that completion percentage a little bit, be smart with the ball, protect it, they could have a good day on offense.
Of course, the versatile Jack Coletto will get involved mainly at the goal line or in short yardage work. Looking at the Florida defense, this is a unit that I was really, higher on than what they performed. They certainly did not hit expectations that I thought for them. Ventrell Miller and Armani Burney, the 2 bright spots at linebacker, 145 tackles, 17.5 tackles for loss between the pair. This is a defense that really struggled, Nick. They weren't exactly great against the pass. They were very bad against the run. Trey Dean, he did have a team-high 77 tackles. He wasn't exactly the biggest of coverage stars for them. Rashad Torrance probably is one of their better coverage guys at the other safety spot. Gervin Dexter, he's a rock-solid guy on the interior, but he certainly didn't play as crucial of a role as he could have. Princely, Buma Namelin, he's been, one of the bright spots for this football team. 8.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, pair of forced fumbles. This is a defense, Nick, again, I thought was going to be really good this year. Only 21 sacks on the season, not great. And, the inside linebacker leads them in that mark. Brenton Cox, of course, got dismissed after the Georgia game. Just as a disaster that got worse, it seemed, as the year went on. I was very happy with the fight of this football team against Florida State. I really thought that was going to be a game that Knowles just blew them out in. But they're coming off back-to-back losses. They played really good against Vanderbilt. They still did lose that game. And I think they've certainly had some bright spots. Held South Carolina to 6 points. That offense next week had 60 points. I think that's something that you certainly got to take into consideration. So I think they haven't exactly been terrible here in the back half of the year. They give up about 500 yards against Florida State, but I think they held up pretty well against A&M, and of course the other games we just talked about. But I think coming into this game, I'm not sure how motivated this defense will be, especially the struggles they've had this season. Another guy like Jason Marshall hasn't exactly lived up to the expectations that we had on him. Just a pretty disappointing year for the Gator defense. One more game to go. Do you expect them to be better or worse here in the season finale?
I certainly feel it. Brenton Cox getting kicked off the team certainly was not something they wanted to see. They had high expectations for him this season, and he ends up getting kicked off after the Georgia game. It's just a disappointing thing across the board. This defense really disappointed. Trey Dean was a guy we highlighted in the preseason. We thought he'd have a lot of tackles. He certainly does with the 77 tackles, but he looks lost in coverage, really kind of loses his man out there sometimes at safety. Torrance, picks up the slack, certainly. He also has 76 tackles on the season. Miller and Burnley, these guys are solid linebackers. Of course, Burnley has the 4 sacks on the season, but this defense just has not lived up to expectations. They're not playing quite as well as we thought they would. They have a lot of solid talented pieces, but they're giving up 28.8 points per game and 415.8 yards allowed per contest. Just a bad number overall in the SEC. You expected more of this defense. This defense looked like they'd be able to, get a bunch of picks, play good in the secondary. We thought the secondary was going to be solid this year. Linebacking core looked like it improved. It just seems like these guys did not gel well together at all, and just a mismatch across the board. Been a poor year for this Florida Gators defense, and I don't expect them to have a good day. I feel like they've kind of checked out a little bit and just kind of focusing on next year.
Looking at an Oregon State defense has been really good this year. I think they certainly had their fair share of struggles against the Ducks. Well, but top to bottom, this unit has certainly really impressed. They held USC early on in the year with only 17 points. Really had their number, and for the majority of this season, they were holding opponents to under 400 yards. Utah was under 400. USC, of course, they were under 400. 470 against Oregon was very uncharacteristic. Some very impressive numbers. Again, only twice this year have opponents had 400-plus yards. Now they're facing third-string quarterback making his first start. This great secondary of Jaden Grant, Rajon Wright, and Alex Austin out there at corner. These guys are going to be in for a bad day. Grant at safety, he's been a great run defender, great in coverage. He's one of those underrated players who's probably going to be an All-American in the conference. They, I think, have been pretty solid at stopping the run as well. They're not exactly deep. They don't have big size, but James Rawls, he's really stepped up defensive tackle. Keaton Oladipo, one of those DBs that gets involved in the box as well. And, of course, the leader in the middle, Lamar Spates. He's been around a long time. I believe this is his 4th year in a row leading the team in tackles with 77. Kyrell Fisher-Morris, another linebacker, who's a veteran stepping up alongside them. This is an Oregon State defense I think is certainly going to come in here and play with a chip on the shoulder. Some of these bigger programs like Florida, bowl games don't really mean too much for them because they're obviously disappointed and whatnot. But I think Jonathan Smith, where this program was when he started compared to where it is now, this bowl game means a lot more to them than it will to the Gators. And I think this defense, especially against Jack Miller, I think they're going to have a pretty good day. We'll be very excited to see the matchup of this run defense that's only given up 114 yards per contest, against that great Florida rushing attack. Richardson his legs not being there is obviously a dynamic you no longer have to account for, but it's still going to be a great matchup, and I think that this game really favors the Beaver defense.
This is a matchup that's very important for Oregon State, right? These guys value bowl games a little bit more. There's also, of course, they lost the first matchup. Utah lost in the Swamp. Of course, this is a totally different team than it was that played week 1 without Richardson and how they've disappointed. But it's still an important matchup for Oregon State and the Pac-12 as a whole here for me. I like this defense. I like some of the pieces on this defense. I think these guys have had a decent year. I look at a guy like Alex Austin, solid defensive back, 9 pass breakups, 53 total tackles on the season, plus a sack for him, and 2 picks for him. I like the secondary. They get after the ball. Jaden Grant has 3 picks. Ryan Cooper has 3 picks. The secondary is good. I think they're going to have a field day against a third-string quarterback. A third-string quarterback making his first career start. I think it's going to be open season. They should get a few picks here and there. I think this is going to be an exciting secondary that can kind of lock down these Florida wide receivers if they do dare to throw the ball. I don't expect Florida to throw the ball a whole lot. This is an exciting matchup for Oregon State. I think this have a lot to prove here. It's been a good defense, 21.4 points per game given up so far this year, 342.3 yards per game. I think the key number to highlight, 114 yards per game rushing they've given up, right? If they can stop the Florida offense on the ground, I think they're going to have a great day, successful all across the board. And I think it starts with a guy like Omar Spates in the middle, 77 total tackles on the season. Fisher-Morris as well, 66 total tackles on the season. So I think this defense is fantastic. They're going to have a great day against Florida.
Now, looking at the final thoughts on the prediction, I always wondered why the Pac-12 and SEC never had bowl tie-ins, and the Las Vegas Bowl finally adopted it. For many years, it was the Pac versus the Mountain West. I think the biggest key to the game for Florida, play with some intensity. I was pretty impressed with the fight against Florida State. They need to play with that once more. And then, of course, get that ground and pound going. I think for Oregon State, need to find a little bit of a passing game. I don't know how they won last contest with only 46 passing yards. That's not going to last very long. And then, of course, you got to force Florida to throw the ball here, especially with Jack Miller being out there. And I think that's exactly what they're going to do. And I think, again, like you were saying, this game means a lot more to them than the Gators do. I don't think that they're going to be a pushover by any means. 31-20 is a score prediction for me, barely covering, could potentially be more. But I think Florida will hang around in there for a good bit because I think the offensive line's going to play with some physicality. Some of the great individual players on the defense, they're going to play hard for the most part as a team. I don't think they're going to be quite entirely there. So I think Oregon State, especially with this game being much closer to home for them than it is in Gainesville, I think Oregon State's going to easily win this one. Should be a fun game, though. These two conferences never play each other, so I'm excited for it.
Oregon State should travel well to Vegas. These fans, they're excited for this matchup. This is a big game for them. Also, the teams, having a great season. They're ranked in the top 25 towards the end of the season. Certainly not where I expected Oregon State to be preseason. This team has been pretty good, finishing currently 14th in the top 25. I like what they've done on defense. The offense has been good at times. I think they have a real chance here to put up some points. I'm going to go 30-17. I just think that I don't really know where the points are coming from for Florida. I think the passing game is going to be stonewalled by this defense, force them to throw the ball, and that's just going to be uncomfortable for Florida. They're going to turn the ball over, and this defense will get a few big stops here and there for Oregon State. I like Oregon State all over this one. I think the confidence points are high on this one for me. I think Oregon State has a great opportunity here to pick up a big bowl game win for them. Nice crowd in Vegas. Should be a fun one for this game. Like I said, important matchup. Pac-12, SEC. Don't see these conferences play a whole lot. A lot of value in this matchup for Oregon State. Interesting to see how they handle it.
It's also going to be a bit of an early kickoff for Oregon State. I wonder if that will bother them. The Gators probably not so much, so that'll be one thing to watch. It's going to be it for today's episode. Nick, as always, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It's going to be it for today's episode, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.